yeah, this fighter does basically no movement before.
Turns in the heels.
Yeah, but the fighter is very slow and it's not too good. This is the fighter you saw at the beginning. He's one of the top 3 fighters. He has he turns his supporting leg on the outside, so yeah, that's what he does, and bends his knee a little bit further before he starts the movement. There's the classical supporting leg bounce
jump in.
Jump. Yeah, the jump in would be this one. So this is kind of a closing step. So these are the most common. These 2 are the most common initial movements. And here we see basically someone who pulls together both legs. And this is a very special kind of technique we just saw with one fighter. He's moving forward with both legs, and the front leg, the kicking leg, is not touching the floor again. So it's kind of a very specific technique.
Stance. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Dominik Holbling. I'm from Austria, and I'm a kickboxing former national team member. I'm studying sports science and doing my PhD currently in biomechanics at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology and the University of Vienna. So kind of a double study.
Very cool.
And my work is related to kind of evidence-based sports device development. So what I'm trying to do is I made a lot of analysis about a kickboxing technique, the double side kick from point fighting kickboxing. I mean, in Taekwondo, it's kind of similar.
Yeah.
And based on my outcomes, I tried to develop a usable, user-centered sports device called the Flexibility Trainer for flexibility and strength in the hip joint. So if you want, I can show you a lot of or a few presentation slides.
Yeah, super.
The right lower corner, you can see a small drawing of the earlier attempt of the Flexibility Trainer. And here in the middle, you can see the double side kick, which I will show you in a few seconds, full technique. So here it is.
Sure.
So this is one of the best participants actually, who performed the double side kick. It's a bit faster in original.
Sure.
You can imagine. So one part was to basically define functional phases for this. That looks actually like that. I think it's not interesting to go through every single phase, but you can see it's kind of complex.
There's a lot for sure. The equation is definitely the way to make it look complex.
It's that's why I did it. It means basically nothing, but no, these are kind of equations, but there are very interesting things. So this, for example, is the balance characteristics during the technique. So what we can see here, I just make it easy, that better fighters actually were less stable during the technique execution, which is very interesting. So my discussion made it like the basis of it will be flexibility, because better fighters are more flexible, so they are able to extend the leg further. So basically they are able to move faster forward and be less stable in this section. So before they do the supporting leg slides, they are a lot less stable because the supporting leg is far behind the center of gravity.
Okay.
So that was one interesting thing. That this is again the sequential action of the whole technique. So these are telegraphs, which I will come in a few minutes. Then we have a pelvis tilt. Afterwards, we have the hip abduction and the full leg extension. And here we have a push of the supporting leg as a first slide of the supporting leg. Do you see my cursor? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And here we have the same for the second leg. So that's what it looks like. Yeah, that's not so interesting. This is also very interesting. So one major source of power generation in this technique, in both techniques, so in the full combination, is called proximal to distal movement sequence. So what it says is basically the leg elevation is used to help with the final power outcome. So if you are pushing your leg up harder and faster, you will have a better power outcome at the end.
Makes intuitive sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but yeah,
it's not obvious either.
Yeah, and it's not easy to train it if you don't know the single parts of it. So particularly what it says is you really need to train the hip abduction for the first leg elevation to make a good kick. So that's simplified of the whole thing. Yeah, so this is not. So now we are here at different telegraphs. So these are basically foot related telegraphs. So yeah, this fighter does basically no movement before.
Turns in the heels.
Yeah, but it's the fighter is very slow and it's not too good. This is the fighter you saw at the beginning. He's one of the top 3 fighters. He has he turns his supporting leg on the outside. So yeah, that's what he does, and bends his knee a little bit further before he starts the movement. There's the classical supporting leg bounce
jump in.
Jump. Yeah, the jump in would be this one. So this is kind of a closing step. So these are the most common. These two are the most common initial movements. And here we see basically someone who pulls together both legs. And this is a very special kind of technique we just saw with one fighter. He's moving forward with both legs, and the front leg, the kicking leg, is not touching the floor again. So it's kind of a very specific technique.
Stance. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I found out is that there are, this is a description of all different or visualization of all different kinds of initial movements. But what I found out is that there are 9 different kind of initiation actions. One is the thorax recline, which basically everybody has.
Yeah.
Or most of the fighters. Then supporting leg closing bounce, which we saw before. Slide in, that's the jump in or jump in. A double closing bounce, and the last thing was the double bounce forward. Then we have supporting leg external rotation, knee bending, shoulder movement, and elbow movement. So the thing with this telegraphs is that everybody does a specific or a individual sequence of these telegraphs. So nobody is there who doesn't have any telegraphs, from 44 fighters, which included 10 world champions. So we had a pretty good sample. but everybody had some initial movements, and the initial movements took about 50% of the whole 50% of the whole technique from the duration. So basically what I'm saying is that if you avoid most of the initial movements or do it a lot later than the others, you basically have 33%, or you give the opponent 33% less time to counterattack, which is a lot, which is really a lot. So that's maybe for our sport. For our sport, it is the most interesting outcome actually, because you can avoid a lot of initial movements. You will not avoid all of them, but you can make them more subtle, and give less duration to your opponent. So
it's very good. I think the stance as well is something that impacts that, doesn't it? How long people's original stance are from where they're coming from, because they have to shift their balance to accommodate for that.
Absolutely. I mean, stance is a very big point. If we just go back here, like this guy who does the slide in, if you have such a wide stance, you will probably not be able to do it without a supporting like slide or something, because otherwise you just fall forward. So the main thing, or the main thing you can get away from it is you should be able to perform your movement so that you don't need a lot of force to lift your leg. So, or you can, like the really good fighters, you don't need a lot of balance. So so if you're moving up your leg, you can afterwards you can slide in with your supporting leg, and then you won't have this initial action before the leg lifting. So that's basically what you can have. The steps are very important to avoid. Basically.
Yeah, definitely. You easily get closed down with a reverse punch or something.
That's basically the more interesting part. Then we have we did a lot of flexibility research. So what you can see here is I built some vectors for the leg and for the femur and the leg. So we had two different types of vectors, and calculated the angle between these vectors to basically simplify comparing people with each other, or comparing techniques with each other. So we now had two different kind of angles, which are basically leg spread angles. And we compared the fighters, or we divided the fighters in different groups and compared these angles with each other. And the very interesting thing is, obviously, better fighters are more flexible. So this is the combined abduction here. Best group, second, third.
And this is based off their WAKO rankings.
They are partially on WAKO rankings, but we made a different approach to divide them into groups. Basically, we had 10 coaches who made an evaluation based on 2D videos, and I gave them mean scores and divided them into groups. So these are basically the best 5 fighters, and these are the 2 groups, because they were very different and a lot better than the others. And these 2 groups are basically split in half. So the remaining 39 fighters, best 5, 30. No, we had exclusions. So I think it's 14 and 14 or something.
Okay.
I don't really remember. I had to write a lot of them. So this is basically combined abduction. This is flexion, best, second best, and third best group. And you can clearly see that there are differences in static flexibility. What is a lot more interesting is this. So here we have the different sequences which we saw before shortly. So this is the initiation, so the start of the leg lift. And here we have the chambering phase. And here you can see that especially first chambering phase and first kick, there are huge differences in these angles between the fighters. So the best group obviously had a lot more leg elevation than the second best and third best group, particularly in the first part, because
we're talking just the chamber here, as in the knee
lifting of the knee.
Yeah, leg elevation and the chambering is here, and then the first kick is here. The second leg elevation and chambering, and second kick. So the best group actually lifted the leg in the first moment as high as the kick was at the end. And the worst group, for example, was like 40 degrees below or something.
Okay, massive.
Yeah, and this is the other angle. So basically, same outcomes with both types of analyzers. Yeah, and this is not so interesting, but also, I mean, for practical use, but also very for scientific use. So the best group, like the dark one, this is the angular velocity of this calculation, and the best group was a lot less changing the velocities, and the worst group, like here, was a lot more changing the angular velocity or angular rate of change. So flexibility is one key component, obviously. It's a nice presentation. So what I tried to do afterwards is to invent a training device which is particularly used for this kind of training. So there are different types of successful trainings in flexibility. I'm sure you have heard them. So there are PNF methods. You heard about this? It's proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. Yeah. And a special PNF method is called CRAC. So contract, relax, agonist contract. So what you do in this this training is you basically use two different reflexes, which are called the autogenic inhibition, which is when you flex a muscle really hard, afterwards it's reducing the muscle tone, so you can go further. Yeah. And the second reflex you're using is the reciprocal inhibition. If you flex an antagonist of a muscle, so the opposite muscle, this muscle also has to reduce the muscle tone. Otherwise, no movement. No movement would be possible. So these two reflexes are used in this PNF CRAC training, and also in this device. I will come immediately to how it works. And there's another functional method which we are using in this for this device. It's called full range of motion strength training. So if you do like hypertrophy training in a full range of motion, you have an effect which is called serial hypertrophy. So you basically add muscle fibers one after each other, so the muscle will be physiologically longer. So these three basics are used in this device. So here it is. Okay, I can show it to you here. So what you're doing is you're standing on this slide, and for the abduction, basically you try to abduct your legs as hard as you can. The device is the braking system is isokinetic, so it is independent from your force. It goes with the normalized velocity. Yeah, so 0.2 meters per second. So you abduct your muscles as hard, or you abduct your legs as hard as you can. So the reciprocal inhibition turns in, so you can go further with your legs. Then you wait. Then you do your CRAC training. So you try again to abduct your muscles as hard as you can. Then you try to flex your muscles as hard as you can and always move further. And then at the end, you put them together, the legs together. So you again do the full range of motion strength training and use your autogenic inhibition. So it is believed to helps you like about 20% more than a regular CRRC training if you do it with the device. So which is actually a lot. We will test it in a few weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. So
sounds painful.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
I already tried it once.
Yeah.
It was really painful. So yeah, that's basically it from my dissertation. Yeah, these are my universities. I try to give you back the monitor. So here we are again.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Especially the analysis of the different types of kicks and how the body position moves in a different way for each different one as well. It's really cool to see.
But even just when you look at the anatomical analysis of it, I suppose, it's the kind of things that you know as a coach intuitively, but when you actually see it in the diagram, just how far the center of mass is ahead of the supporting foot, and therefore how fast you have to move to be able to recover your balance points. So your push off foot has to recover very quickly to come towards your center of mass so that you can push for the second side kick. Whereas if a person is slower, they can't extend their center of gravity as far, and so they can't they all work together to limit the speed of the kick, the height of the knee and the preparation, the overall reach of the kick, the distance that you cover across the mat. So there's absolutely there's a lot of factors that link together.
Absolutely. So I'm not kind of nothing like a magician, I also have my coach experience, and with that I try to find different ways to analyze this particular points and try to prove if it's right or wrong, but what I think the advantages and disadvantages will be. So as I said, I'm also not a magician. I didn't invent a new kick or something. I just looked up what actually is good and what is not too good in a kick execution. So most or many coaches will know parts of my study because of their experience, but it's kind of it's parts of my studies are the first time someone really proved it.
No, it's really cool, definitely. I wonder posture and body position, how was there any things you noticed with that, and the execution, particularly with velocity?
Yeah, you should be as straight up as you can. So better fighters had a lot less pelvis tilt, which results in the recline of the torso. So obviously, if you're leaned further behind, your center of gravity is behind your supporting leg, and so you can't really move forward. Yeah. So it's kind of a obvious thing if you're able to explain it, but it's also very interesting scientific kind of thinking.
Yeah. And the standing foot then, Dominik, did you see any difference in particularly velocity of moving forward in the variance between people, how much they turn that standing foot?
Yeah,
we say
that's a question I'd like to know the answer to as well.
Yeah, between like 180 degrees behind and things like that versus like, you know, some people kind of push off with like a side facing, and then some people will fully turn.
No, actually, I don't think I didn't look at it, but I don't think there are a lot of differences in the final movement velocity, because there are so many factors which are kind of resulting in the final movement speed. However, what I can tell you is purely mechanically, it's better to have, or it's the best thing to have it like 45 to 90 degrees turn, because then you can add the push of your ankle into the fighting movement. But as I said, there are a lot of factors, so to calculate if this factor would result in that factor in the final velocity would take like 1,000 participants or something like that. So
but it is what makes that last fighter, you know, that one anomaly, the one guy who you know, his knee is pointing almost directly behind him in his preparation, and so he's got a very unusual prep there. But that makes it even more interesting, because if he can be effective with that style, it gives us something else that we're not seeing very often. And one of the conversations myself and Richie had over the last week or so, we were talking about how, you know, recognizing the technique in its beginning, you know, and selecting an appropriate action because you've practiced against it, you've recognized that it's a familiar movement pattern. And then you have someone who's just a little bit unorthodox. They have, like you said, that double bouncing step in, or the changing of the back foot being almost, you know, a very defensive stance, you know, body almost facing away. Like you're expecting the person from there to take a nice counter side kick or hook kick, but not to be pushing forward with a lot of speed. So yeah, I think there could be an advantage as well to the unique and the novel.
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting that you said this one guy who did the double jump forward kind of thing, because I wrote my master's thesis about him. He does a lot of things different, and he's also one of the 3 best fighters, which means actually a lot, because 10 of the fighters were actual world champions. So the best 3 of these 10 are like absolutely the best fighters in the world. I can't say you the name, but you probably would recognize him.
Yeah.
But the very interesting thing is he does most of the movement parts absolutely different, but is one of the best kickers in the world. So that was very interesting thing. Also, his hip angles during the movements were absolutely different. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend someone to train to be like him, because it could also be kind of an anatomical issue or anatomical specialty that he's kicking like that. You know, it's kind of very difficult to say what is if these kind of kickings could be or kicking techniques could be the next step, or they are just some kind of special feature from someone.
Yeah, because they probably have their own little quirks and how their body moves, and their coordination is different, but still they're effective with their technique. I wonder, based on that then, did you see much variance in the same participant from the same kick? So when you look at one person, was the same kick, when it was analyzed more than once, was it slightly different every time?
Slightly, yes. But particularly the good fighters they don't have a lot of variations between their kicks. So it was just kind of the not so good fighters. I mean, they also had at least 3 years of experience and at least one fight. But they showed a lot more variance in their kicking, obviously. I mean, of course, if you're practicing it for 15 years, you're probably
definitely
more constant.
Yeah, because we spoke to a guy who studies skill acquisition recently, and he made the example of somebody who hits with a hammer. When they analyze that, every single hit is actually different. So it's interesting to see how it's different as well. And then never mind different circumstances within the fight, whether like the distance is so you know it's
then it's a lot more variance, obviously. But also every technique was a little different than to the other. I mean, there are so many values. If you just take enough, you will always have some differences. But as I said, the better group was a lot more constant than the not so good group.
And then from the point of view of where you're going next with this, you're looking at evaluating a variation on a known stretching protocol using, again, a device that you've kind of created and patented. What's your control mechanism for that? So when you go to study the effectiveness of it, what will be your control?
The control group would do, so in my actual PhD, I will not analyze the long-term measurement. So I will just have one training and compare 10 participants pre and post training session. So there's no control group, obviously, because you
just want to see if it increases range of motion.
I just need the short time increases. But we are planning to do afterwards a training study. So there will probably be 2 different control groups. So one is basically doesn't train, so or train in a setting like always. One group does a static, specially defined static flexibility training. I think 2 or 3 times a week. The 2 different exercises which you can do with the device, and one group trains with the flexibility trainer, and then we will compare each group.
And that's when it gets exciting.
Yeah, but that's that will not be my work anymore. Fortunately. So as I said, I'm doing the biomechanics, so not the training science.
Yeah. You have the proof of concept.
Yeah, but I have another very interesting project with my company, if you're interested.
Oh, very good.
So we are developing a force measuring boxing glove. So this is it. So you can see. So what it does, we have a sensor inside here, and if you punch, I can see your data on the tablet. So your speed, your velocity, your speed, your force, your impact. Yeah, and with the data, we are doing different trainings like high intensity interval trainings or just the regular training or different kind of rankings. So comparing each other. Yeah, that's what we are doing together with Top 10. So you probably know that.
With Peter, yeah.
Really cool.
Together with Peter Bruckenhauser and a robotic company. And yeah, it will be on the market soon.
I think that would be a very interesting tool for some further study when you look at the we say how the rules are designed for ring sports and tatami sports, you know, because a big element of it is how much contact is permissible, and it's always been notional. It's always been more perceptual than actually you know, a raw data driven item. And it would be very interesting to do a little bit of study to see, you know, how does a referee's perception of it. So if, for example, if you were to put two light contact fighters in a ring together and you have a referee judging, you know, referees judging the contact based on what they're seeing and overlay that against the data to see what the people are experiencing, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, actually we tried to develop with the glove and foot gear and shin gear together. We tried to develop a full scoring system. So basically, what it does is we have a video system which compares simultaneously where you hit, and with the glove, you know how hard you hit and if you really reached him. And there should be kind of an automated point awarding where another referee says if it's okay on the outside. So he has the 4 views and the date of the punch, and he says yes, no, yes, no. So that's really one thing. Yeah. Another very interesting thing, what we try to do with the glove is we are currently performing a study to make the first valid and reliable sport-specific endurance performance diagnostic. So you probably know on the treadmill or on the bike with like that measurement and VO2 max, yes. And we try to develop a protocol with the gloves as well. So
you're not hiding a needle in there to take the blood while you're sparring. That's not what's happening here, right?
Maybe. We will see.
Yeah, I've done quite a few of those tests when people are cycling or running or, you know, swimming or, you know, different things. But you know, the apparatus changes very dramatically depending on what environment you're in. You know, it's always been an interesting challenge to do something while in an opposed environment. So everything is not so much of a problem if you're unopposed. If it's a cyclical, like monostructural activity, then it's not so bad. But once it's opposed and you can't predict the movement of the person, then it gets very difficult. So
yeah, of course. I mean, it's just what it is. It is a performance diagnostic. So you just get information about your status of endurance. So it's not your status of I don't know, perception of your opponent or your status of stress level or things like that. So, but I think it's a very good step in the right direction. For example, in Austria for the national team, we need to make this performance diagnostics on the bicycle, which is, kind of, in my opinion, kind of irrelevant for the sports specific performance. So, I argued like for many years with our federation, but it actually didn't change until now. So now that we are trying to develop this thing, they are working close together now with us. And hopefully we will have a better performance diagnostics in the future.
Otherwise, you'll have to become good cyclists.
Yeah. And I'm not cycling, so it helps me basically nothing.
Yeah, really cool. It's, as you said, a step in the right direction, and be cool to see where technology brings ring sports and combat sports in the future.
Yeah, that's my aim.
Oh, really cool.
Super.
Yeah. So yeah, that was brilliant, Dominik. Thank you so much for sharing what your research and your findings with us. That was really
You're welcome.
I'm sure people will find it useful.
If you want to have further information, my homepage is I-sporttech. This is my company.com.
Great.
Brilliant.
We'll put that in the description. Super.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thanks a million for your time, Dominik.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank
you.
So much.
It was a pleasure for me.
Yeah,
have a nice day.
Stuff.
Yeah, I hope I could show you something interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Much appreciated. Bye-bye.
Welcome.
See you, Dominik. Bye.